Hi guys, Claudia Boleyn here, and I know it's been a really long time since I made a video, but this one is so important that I decided I just had to get on and make it, and I really hope you watch this through to the end. I'll try and make it as short as possible. But as you may know, we are heading up to a general election, and the date of that election is the 12th of December. It's so important that we are informed about this and that everyone who can vote does vote. So first of all, before I even begin this, I'm going to urge you to please register to vote or to check you're registered. I'm going to put a link to that in the description box, okay, so go there now if you're not sure. And I'll also remind you again at the end. But please, we have this right to vote in this country. This is so huge. I can't tell you how passionately I feel about this. This is going to decide the soul of our country for the next God knows how long. It's so important that we use our voices, especially young people. I know a lot of my viewership are younger people, and you are the demographic that is going to change this election. You have the power to do that. The youth vote could swing it, but please register. Okay, so the choice is going to come down to Boris Johnson from the Conservative Party or Jeremy Corbyn from the Labour Party. I'm voting Labour. I am now a member of the Labour Party. I have become an official member of the Labour Party with a card and everything, and I was inspired to do that because of how radical and forward-thinking and progressive this current era of the Labour Party is. I speak about politics quite a lot on this channel, but as you know, I have a lot of issues with, for example, the new Labour era with Tony Blair and the Iraq War and all that sort of thing. And so having Jeremy Corbyn take over this party and the policies that they're putting in place, which I will talk to you about in a minute, it's changed everything for me, and it's made me feel like change really is possible. And a lot of people don't understand that. The detractors of the Labour Party will say that people who like Jeremy Corbyn regard it as a cult, and him as the sort of figurehead of the cult. It's nothing to do with Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn is the man who's in charge, and he's the man who is creating these policies. He's ultimately in charge of the party, obviously. But it is the policies and it is the message which appeals to me and so many others. If Jeremy Corbyn tomorrow decided to step down, and I hope he doesn't because I like the man, but if he does decide to step down, as long as they keep those policies, I'm on board. This country cannot handle another 10 years of the Tories. We cannot handle more austerity. We can't afford to risk our NHS. More Tory leadership is not something we can handle. And when I say we can handle, we're talking about the people who are the most vulnerable in society. Already people have died from austerity, from benefit cuts, from these horrible things the Tories have put through. We just can't handle it anymore. We have got the choice now to change things, and I urge you to please join me in doing that. The Tories are trying to focus this election on Brexit because obviously that's a huge topical issue for us right now. But the truth is this election is so much more than that. We are not just voting on Brexit here. They want you to think that's what we're doing, but we're not. We're voting on the next years of our country and what direction we choose to go in. I'm so fed up of so-called journalists and people in the media pretending that they do not understand Labour's Brexit position. I want to just describe Labour's Brexit position here just so you know how easy it is to do it even off the top of your head. Labour's position is that they will negotiate a deal with the EU within 6 months, and then they will put the vote to the people, so the people will decide. That's it. Now if people don't like that Brexit policy, fine, say you don't like the policy. Do not pretend Labour do not have a policy, because it's very simple. Brexit in my mind has been nothing but a burden on this country. It's all we've talked about for the last couple of years. It's completely pushed aside other very important things we should have been talking about. We should have been moving forward, and instead we're at a complete standstill. Also, the division in this country is horrific. Hate crimes have gone up. There has been, unfortunately, a lot of racism and xenophobia, and the sad thing is it's because we're in austerity. It's because people at the bottom are struggling so very much. The tabloids are whipping people into this frenzy of, oh, the reason that you're poor is because of immigrants, when of course it's not because of immigrants, it's because of the very, very rich hoarding their wealth. We are one of the richest countries in the world, but you know what? The vulnerable at the bottom wouldn't know that because the people in the top have kept it for themselves. It's then very easy for those people at the top to pretend that the reason our services are in crisis and why children are visiting food banks and why people are living in poverty in this country, one of the richest countries in the world, it's so easy for them to pin that on immigrants. It's not because of immigrants, and it's certainly not because of people on benefits. And I absolutely despise the manipulation that those people with that much wealth and power use in order to turn people who are vulnerable, who are struggling, to try and make them hate other people who are also vulnerable. What needs to happen is all of us who are struggling, all of us who want better, we need to band together. What it comes down to here is that you have the Tories who want to give tax cuts to the rich, and Labour who want to take a little bit more from the people at the top. They can still be rich, but we'll just take a little bit more from them so that everyone else who's struggling in society doesn't have to struggle quite so much. It's not communism, it's very simple. It's just asking that the people with the most in society give a little bit more. Something I've said for years, which has been deemed controversial, and which is only really now starting to become quite a popular idea, is that we should not have billionaires. We should not have billionaires in this country. In my mind, you cannot have a good billionaire. It is impossible. A billion is so much money that you wouldn't even know what to do with it. You couldn't possibly spend spend it all if you tried. There is no way that anybody good could have that much money and remain a billionaire, because if they were a good person, they would not be that rich, because they'd be giving their money to people who deserved it. And as for the argument that there are billionaires out there who are very great with charity and do give their money to deserving causes, that's good of them, but I'm sorry, that shouldn't be their right. It should not be the choice of a billionaire whether they want to be a good person or whether they want to be an evil person. When people are starving, when children in this country are living in poverty, when in the West End you see homeless people sleeping rough, and you see homeless spikes to stop them from sleeping in doorways, sleeping in the warm and not getting rained on and attacked by people, we cannot allow people to have that obscene amount of wealth. It's disgusting. We have enough money in this country to eradicate poverty. It's there. How can you look families who use food banks in the eyes? How can you go past a homeless person on the street and know that you'd rather vote for the very rich to have tax cuts than for the very rich to give a little bit more, which would help everybody else? There's so much division in society at the moment, and people say it's because of Brexit. It's not because of Brexit. Brexit is just an example of how it's manifesting. People are scared, and that's because money isn't being distributed fairly. People are struggling. For example, look at the tragedy of Grenfell. Are you going to tell me that the people in charge of that would have put flammable cladding on their own houses? Of course they wouldn't. It's because they view the poor as a different species. They don't matter to them. Their lives don't matter. So many blocks of flats in this country still have flammable cladding on them. These people live in danger every single day. I can't imagine the fear of that. And more than that, the anger that nothing is being done. I'm afraid that the Tories are going to privatise the NHS, and I'm so proud of the NHS. A lot of people say to me that I don't have pride in being British because I don't think the Empire was a good thing and I'm not pro-colonialism. I think it was terrible. But there are some things that we do very well in this country, and I am so proud of our NHS. We can't afford to let the NHS go. I talk to people all the time, and lots of people from America who have to pay for their healthcare. And just one illness, one accident can plunge a family into poverty for the rest of their lives. We cannot have that happen here. And austerity. Austerity's hit the NHS as well. As you know, I took part in the STEPS programme, which is for my EID, basically known as borderline personality disorder. And they were, at the time, this is a therapy which has changed my life, and that, yes, the rest of the videos for that will be coming soon, by the way, anyone who follows that series that I do on here. That changed my life, and that will have saved lives, because people with our condition are very suicidal, and there's unfortunately a very high suicide rate and death rate with this disorder. But even while we were going through the process, the people in charge were despairing because they were going to be closed down. We had to fill in forms to try and say how much we needed it and how much, please don't close it down because we need it. The government just want to save money. They don't care about saving lives. They don't care about people who need help. And that's the thing about austerity. The people who impose it, these Tories who have so much wealth, it doesn't make any difference to their lives. Austerity doesn't hit them at all. They're not suffering. They're not living any differently than they were before. And you know what makes me so angry about the way they think about the world? They say people have the right to be super rich because apparently they worked hard to get there, and that hard work should be rewarded. I agree that hard work should be rewarded, but if that's the case, then why are we not paying nurses more? Why not carers? Why not teachers? Are you going to tell me that the super rich work harder than a nurse in the NHS? It's ridiculous. The Tories are completely out of touch. They act like tax cuts for the rich are some sort of reward for working hard and getting to the very top. And they say that that helps business somehow because it rewards business people and keeps them in the country. Well, I think what would be better for business in this country is what Labour's going to do, which is to fund communities that need it. We could have the most fantastic business people, the most fantastic scientists, people who are really going to make their mark on this country, people who have so much to offer, who are going to bring us forward. But those people might never get there. They might never get those opportunities. We might never know about that. They might pass us by because they live in poverty. They don't have the opportunities. We have to invest in the vulnerable in society because those people deserve a chance just the same as everyone else. I mean, how do you think Boris Johnson got to the place he's in now? It's because he went to Eton. It's because of the company he kept. While Jeremy Corbyn was out there fighting for social justice and protesting racism, Boris Johnson was part of the Bullingdon Club and enjoying himself at Eton. He doesn't understand the real world. There was a debate recently on ITV, and Boris Johnson couldn't answer any question without immediately going back to the phrase, "Get Brexit done." Ask Boris Johnson about ordinary people in their lives and he'd draw a complete blank. There was a man on Question Time last night who said he earned £80,000 a year. He believed he was an average member of society. These people live in a complete bubble. I can't imagine what that amount of money would do. I grew up in a single parent household. We had free school meals and our mum struggled. And even we were lucky because some of my friends were in much worse situations than we were. I mean, I can't tell you the tiny percentage of £80,000 that we had per year, what we got by on, what my friends had to get by on. And this man thinks that taxing a little bit higher on 80,000 is an imposition and unfair. I can't even imagine having that amount of money. And certainly I can't imagine having that amount of money and making a fuss about having to pay a little bit more so that the poor people in this country don't go hungry. In the ITV debate the other day, there were some, I suppose they must have been Tory supporters in the audience, and they actually laughed when Jeremy Corbyn spoke about the impacts of climate change and how that's going to unfairly impact the global south. They actually laughed at that, they scoffed. Labour is proposing a green industrial revolution because we have to do something. Climate change is real and we are running out of time. Politics is not a game, it matters to us, it matters to this country, it matters to the rest of the world. So the Labour Manifesto came out yesterday and I spent the day reading it and annotating it. So I just wanted to share with you a few parts from that manifesto that I thought were particularly good. Everything in this manifesto is trying to get rid of the inequality in this country. As someone who struggles with mental illness myself, listen to this. A Labour government will provide an additional £1.6 billion a year to ensure new standards for mental health are enshrined in the NHS constitution, ensuring access to treatments is on par with that for physical health conditions. Our mental health hospitals are not fit for purpose. Over 1,000 people with mental health problems face hospital stays in old, dormitory-style hospital wards, while less than 1 in 4 A&E departments have the facilities to deal with people experiencing a mental health crisis. We will invest £2 billion to modernise hospital facilities and end the use of inappropriate out-of-area placements. I cannot tell you how that will change the lives of people with mental health difficulties. At the moment, we're treated like absolute crazy people when we're experiencing a crisis, like we're not even human sometimes. And A&E can't deal with it. It's not because they don't want to, it's because they don't have the staff, they don't have the money, they don't have the facilities. I was actually in A&E quite recently for my mental health, and although the staff did their best, there simply weren't enough of them to deal with the amount of people in that A&E room. Labour will implement the full recommendations set out in the independent review of the Mental Health Act so that people are given choice, autonomy and the treatment they need. Autonomy is so important, because just because we're suffering with mental health difficulties does not mean that we're children. We need to be treated in the same way as you would treat someone with any other illness, with respect and with dignity. Labour will invest more in eating disorder services and ensure NICE guidelines on eating disorders are implemented. This is so important. I talk to people so regularly who come to me because they're struggling with an eating disorder, and it's something that really isn't taken seriously enough, and there isn't enough help out there. Our £845 million plan for Healthy Young Minds will more than double the annual spending on children and adolescent mental health services, and I can't stress the importance of that enough. If my issues had been caught early, if I had been able to go through therapy, if I had been able to be healed almost when I was younger, if that had been caught early, I would not be experiencing anywhere near the difficulties that I am now in my later life as a 25-year-old. If we can get that help to children and adolescents and get them seen quickly and get them the help they need, it will change lives. And I talk to people all the time who have exactly the same experience as me, some people who are much older and who got diagnoses much later in life. And you know what it feels like? It feels like a waste of life. And every day you think about the loss of potential and what could I have done, what could I have been if I didn't have these issues that held me back. If only it had been caught sooner, if only I'd had the help when I was younger. Labour want to guarantee every child access to school counsellors. This will help children in abusive situations, children who are mentally ill and the symptoms are just starting to come out. This is exactly the sort of policy I was hoping to see in this manifesto. So something people are talking about a lot, and with good reason, is that Labour want to abolish prescription charges in England, and I feel this so very strongly. Essentially, making people pay for their prescriptions is punishing them and making them poorer for being ill. Now, if you think about someone like me, I have to be on antidepressants because of my mental illnesses. I'm on antidepressants, I'm on anti-anxiety and antipsychotics. I need those things to survive. It really is that simple. Before I was on them, well, I thought I was going to kill myself and I'd be dead by now. There are people who need cancer medication, people who are in pain, and it's through no fault of their own, and they're being punished. They're having to pay for medicine that they need. There's enough money in this country for that not to happen. It makes me so angry that there are people out there having to pay for cancer medication. Think about that for a minute. Think about the wealth in this country, and it makes me sick. In terms of schools, Labour want maximum class sizes of 30 for all primary school children. The curriculum is narrowing, and that denies children access to modern languages, arts, music, or technical and engineering skills, and these are all skills that will be so vital in a world shaped by climate change. It worries me, especially as someone who's into art and music, that children are not necessarily learning these things in school. They're not having that outlet. Labour will end the high-stakes testing culture of schools by scrapping Key Stage 1 and 2 SATs and baseline assessments, and refocusing assessment on supporting pupil progress. This is absolutely huge. At the moment, schools are having to waste time. They're being made to prepare kids for SATs. And instead of teaching them things that will actually help them in their next year and give them the knowledge they need, which is what you're supposed to do in a schools, they're instead having to make them perform for these tests. And then so much time is taken for this and making sure they get good grades in it. And the schools are so worried that, oh God, if the kids don't score well in these tests, then they're going to take funding away from our schools and they're going to say bad things about our school. And it's a constant stress environment. That is not what school should be about. There is more to school, especially for younger children, than constant stress and testing. Now listen to this. We will introduce an arts pupil premium to fund arts education for every primary school child. But listen to this as well. We will review the curriculum to ensure that it enriches students and covers subjects such as Black history and continues to teach issues like the Holocaust. Pupils will learn both the science of climate and environmental emergency and the skills necessary to deal with them. When I was at school, we didn't learn any Black history. I could have come away from my time at junior school not knowing any Black historical figures. Everyone I learned about was white. And kids not only being required to learn about climate change, but learning what we can do to combat it is so important, because these are the people that are going to grow up and it's going to impact their whole lives. Listen to this. We will poverty-proof schools, introducing free school meals for all primary school children, encouraging breakfast clubs and tackling the cost of school uniforms. This is so relevant to the people I knew and the people I grew up with, because people really struggled. It was awful. You'd get your uniform list through and it would be a panic. It would be a feeling of, oh God, how much is that going to cost? Oh my God, I need a blazer, I need shoes, I need this. Oh God, I've grown out of these shoes. What am I going to do? Listen to this as well. We will close the tax loopholes enjoyed by elite private schools and use that money to improve the lives of all children. And we will ask the Social Justice Commission to advise on integrating private schools and creating a comprehensive education system. So Labour have come under fire for saying that they don't believe that there should be private schools, and we need to look, like they say here, into integrating these private schools, eventually getting rid of them. I'm 100% for that, because I do not believe that having more money should mean that you get a better education. I don't think it's fair. I think children should have the same opportunities no matter what their background or where they come from. Something very relevant to me is that Labour are going to abolish tuition fees, and this makes me so happy. I'm sure we can all remember, well, some of you guys, if you're my age, you probably remember how the Lib Dems majorly let us down during the coalition about tuition fees. And it strikes me as very wrong that you should have to already be in debt the moment that you're finished with university. We should not be punishing people for wanting to do further education and for wanting to learn. I mean, our generation, I mean, it's horrible to think that you get your degree and then, wow, okay, I've got debt to pay off and I'll be paying that off for a very long time. And that's not something normal, by the way. It's not something that goes on everywhere. In the section about police, and actually some of my views on police and policing are probably quite radical, but something that really pleased me here is that they acknowledge that there's a bias, there's an institutional bias against BAME communities, so that's Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities, and they talk about the stop and search, which impacts Black and Asian men more than anyone else. So they've said that what they want is better police training, and not only in terms of race issues, but in terms of domestic abuse and how they would respond to those sort of situations. And I mean, it's not perfect, but it's better. It's starting to acknowledge that there is a problem and trying to work around that. There's also the idea that police should be involved with local communities, with schools, with mental health services, with drug rehabilitation programs. And again, it's not perfect, but that might bridge the gap a little. If we can have a police force that are being taught to work against that bias and to be fairer, if they understand addiction, if they're taught to understand mental health conditions, then hopefully we won't have so many incidents where you have the vulnerable being taken advantage of and being harmed by the people that are supposed to protect us. I've realised this is already very long, so I'm not going to go through many more of these, but I'm just going to pick out a couple more. So Labour are going to introduce a real living wage of at least £10 per hour. It might not seem like a lot, and actually I hope that we can go further with that, but it's so much more than what the Conservatives are offering, and it makes a real difference to families. Labour want to give everyone full rights from day one on the job, and they want to strengthen protections against whistleblowers and rights against unfair dismissal for all workers. I think that's fantastic, because it means that somebody who is in an unfair situation at work and someone who thinks that they're deserving of better pay and the workers are being mistreated, they have power, they have a voice, they are protected if they want to stand up to the rich and powerful and speak about that. Labour will require breaks during shifts to be paid. That is huge, because at the moment you hear stories, I mean, I've spoken to people who've said that they actually have to clock in when they go for a toilet break, because that doesn't count as working apparently, so they can't even go to the toilet. I mean, that's absolutely beyond comprehension to me. Labour are going to extend maternity pay from 9 to 12 months, and they're also doubling paternity leave. I still think paternity leave should be up, because I think we need to be looking at a situation where it doesn't matter the gender of the parent, there is someone able to look after that child, and I want to make that more equal. But I'm so pleased that that's going up, because I've wanted paternity leave to be made longer for so long now. And also, Labour want to review family-friendly employment rights, including rights to respond to family emergencies, because everyone has situations in their families, a family bereavement or something awful that happens, and you can't foresee these things. And sometimes some companies, some places of work, they actually take that out on their workers, so they would hold that against those people who would have to have that time off for a family emergency, and it's so wrong. Labour will also repeal the anti-trade union legislation, including the Trade Union Act of 2016, and create new rights and freedoms for trade unions to help them win a better deal for working people. Of course, Labour is the party of trade unions, and that makes me extremely proud. So Labour want to introduce 10 days of paid leave for survivors of domestic abuse, and that's fantastic that that's being taken seriously. Misogyny and violence against women and girls will become hate crimes, and it frightens me that they're not already hate crimes. Labour also want to end disability discrimination, so they will update the Equality Act to introduce new specific duties, including disability leave, paid and recorded separately from sick leave. So in terms of LGBT equality, which is important to me, I'm a bisexual person, I talk about LGBT plus issues here all the time, Labour is committed to reforming the Gender Recognition Act to introduce self-declaration for transgender people, which is very good. There was a part in this manifesto that worried a lot of people, and when I first read it, I thought, oh, what's this about? This doesn't seem very Labour. And it was about the idea of having same-sex wards, and a lot of trans people were worried because the word sex was used rather than gender, but luckily it was confirmed by the Labour Party within a day, very quickly, that trans people would be protected under that and that they would be able to go into the right wards, so don't worry about that, and I was hugely relieved to hear that. Also, Labour want to provide sufficient funding for schools to deliver mandatory LGBT plus inclusive relationships and sex education, and people protest this to this day. For some reason they don't want their kids to find out that LGBT people exist, which is terrible, because some of those children are LGBT themselves. I mean, it's not corrupting a child to let them know that some people have two mummies and some people have two daddies, you know? I'm going to try and rush through these now. So basically, the Windrush scandal continues to create new victims. Labour will end its injustices and provide fair compensation to those who have unfairly suffered. Labour also says that once they're here, refugees will have the right to work, to access public services, and will be treated humanely by government at all levels. That is so, so important, because people resent refugees. Refugees are people fleeing from war. They've come from nothing and they've come to us for help, and the idea of turning those people away and mistreating them makes me sick. Labour is going to get rid of the rape clause, which I'm so happy about. I don't know if I've spoken about the rape clause on here, but basically there's a 2 children benefit cap at the moment. So the benefit cap means that you have 2 children, you can have benefit for 2 children, but you can't for any more, and to me that's ludicrous, because the only person that suffers from that is the child. Why would you make a child live in a more difficult life simply for the crime of being born? And the rape clause exists because if you would like benefit for another child, then you have to prove that you were raped. So it puts victims of rape already in such a terrible situation. It's so dehumanising. You'd have to fill in all the forms to prove that you were raped. How do you prove that you were raped anyway? It's absolutely ridiculous. I love this part, and I put this on Twitter as well. Labour follows the social model of disability, that it is not the people's condition or impairment that disables them, but society's failure to adapt to those conditions and impairments. I agree with that as someone who has disability myself. It is not that there's anything wrong with us in terms of us being lesser than anyone else. We're different. People who have disabilities have different needs, we have different hurdles, but I think that's the same with everybody. I mean, for example, with my mental health difficulties, yeah, they're difficult to deal with, but the most difficult thing is the way society reacts to those with mental health issues, and the way society is kind of set up against us in a very ableist fashion. Labour will stop the dehumanising work capability and PIP assessments, which repeatedly and falsely find ill or disabled people fit to work, and make sure all assessments are done in-house. Now, this is something that I know a lot about because I talk to so many people who've had to do their PIP assessments. I know a lot about this issue, and it's awful that you go into the situation and you are already assumed to be some sort of scammer, some sort of benefit cheat. There have been all sorts of horrible rumours flying around that the Conservatives have actually briefed these people to actually find people who aren't fit for work because they're trying to save money. So for example, you've got people who are very, very severely ill. They have to go to a meeting, they're treated as if they're a scammer, they have to try and prove how ill they are, they have to try and show their worst their worst self, and that's so difficult. You already know, if you're someone with disability, especially mental health as well, with mental health issues, it's hard to prove those things, and for people to come at you and ask you to prove that and treat you like you're some sort of liar, it's hugely demoralising. And they've denied this money to so many people who need it, and that's caused deaths. It really has, it's caused death, it's that serious. And luckily some people have been able to appeal it, but they've still had to go through a lengthy appeal service in order to get the money that they are owed and that they need to survive. I mean, it's evil, that system. It's completely evil. Okay, last I'm going to talk about here, there's so much more in this manifesto. I'll put the link in the description box and I would urge you to read it for yourself. It's so worth reading and it's so full of hope. So Labour want to introduce a War Powers Act to ensure that no Prime Minister can bypass Parliament to commit to conventional military action. Unlike the Conservatives, we will implement every single recommendation of the Chilcot inquiry. So you know how I feel about the Iraq War and the other illegal wars we've been involved in, and our military and the effect we've had on the rest of the world, and it's so important that we are held to account for that. And that is something that I've always admired about Jeremy Corbyn's Labour, is that they're not afraid to admit to the wrongs that our country has done, as well as defending the good things that we've done, like the NHS. They say they want to conduct an audit on the impact of Britain's colonial legacy to understand our contribution to the dynamics of violence and insecurity across regions previously under British colonial rule. As someone who is half Indian and knows, well, I'm very interested in basically how Britain hurt India and left them in a terrible situation with partition and Bengal famine, the Amritsar massacre, just to name a few. It's so important that we are in a country that is able to look back, and instead of being all like, oh, glorious Britain, God save the Queen, aren't we powerful? It's so important that we look back and we see the harm we've caused as well. I think the strongest countries are able to do that and move forward. It's so relevant to life today and the multicultural society that we have. If we look at colonialism and empire, that's part of the reason we have a multicultural society. And so many people now in this country will have been impacted by our colonial history. We have to understand it. We have to do what we can to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. And if we can, we have to make better. We have to heal if we can. If there's any way we can help and make that legacy any less awful, we have to try and do it. So I'm going to leave it there for today. This is so long and I intended it to be short, but I have so much to say about this. Please make your voice heard. I would urge you to vote Labour. I know I can't tell you who to vote for, but I truly think that it will help this country so much, and to the extent that I've actually joined the Labour Party. I mean, I've never joined a party before in my life. I've been a left-winger, I've thought a lot about politics, but I've never felt like we have an opportunity like this to truly change the direction of this country. I don't want to see us go backwards. I don't want there to be more racism and xenophobia and hate crime. I couldn't handle there being more austerity. I mean, I went to London for a birthday treat this year back in April. I don't travel very much because of my mental health difficulties, but I went with my mum and my brother. It was a huge thing, and we were in the West End of London, and there's homeless people. There were homeless people just on the street, and like, sorry, I'm getting upset, but there were homeless people, and we're one of the richest countries in the world, and there are people living homeless on the street begging for money, and there are homeless spikes down so that they don't have anywhere where they can go, and it's so wrong. Anyway, and there's people going to food banks, and it makes me so upset when the people at the top are getting tax cuts and people are just standing for this. People are letting the Conservatives do it, and we need to make our voices heard. Okay, I love you loads. I'm getting upset now, but politics is real life, and people say that, you know, some people act like politics is a game and it doesn't matter, but it's people's lives, and people have died because of austerity and because of inequality, and I just want the world to be better, and I think this is our way to get things started. So please vote Jeremy Corbyn. I'll put the way you can register to vote in the description box, and also a link to the Labour Manifesto. Okay, I love you loads. I will see you really soon. Okay, bye.